John Knotts has had an incredible string of unexpected opportunities come his way throughout his entire life.
I'm sitting there thinking to myself, this is not my plan.
He's learned the secret recipe to creating and seizing those happy accidents. And in this episode of the podcast, he shares those secrets with us. What are some of the tips that you have for people on how to create more favorable chances for yourself?
Well, the big thing is,
What's the secret? You're about to find out. Sit back and get ready for a lesson in how to manufacture and seize your own lucky breaks. Hey there, friends. This is Dennis Geelen, author of the Happy Accidents newsletter and the book, The Accidental Solopreneur. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Accidents podcast, where we dive into true stories of wildly successful people, products, or businesses, all of which can trace their success back to a chance encounter, a serendipitous event, or a fluke invention. In each episode, we unravel the tales of unexpected triumphs and the remarkable journeys that led to their incredible success. I'm on a mission to explore the fascinating world of happy accidents, and I'm thrilled to have you along for the ride. So, why should you tune in? Well, besides the entertainment value of these incredible stories, there's a hidden treasure trove of lessons we can learn from them. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative mind, or simply someone who enjoys a good narrative, this podcast is your go-to source for inspiring stories and valuable insights. Get ready for a roller coaster of surprises, a dash of luck, and a sprinkle of wisdom. This is the Happy Accidents Podcast, where success meets serendipity. Let's jump into today's adventure. Okay, I am very excited to have John Knotts on the Happy Accidents Podcast with us this week. I'm going to start with a bit of an overview because, John, you've got quite the cool, diverse background, and we're going to be diving into that a bit. But let me read off some of the highlights here. So, you've got over 30 years of military, nonprofit, and commercial leadership coaching and consulting. You and your wife own and operate one of the largest equestrian businesses in South Texas. It's 100 acres with over 40 horses on the property. You're also big into whiskey and cigars, and you've built a business around that passion as well. And you share a certain viewpoint on luck that I'm excited to dive into with you on the show today. So, John, welcome to the podcast.
well, thank you very much for the invite. Love to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this with you. So, what I want to do though is just kind of paint a bit of a picture first. Let's take it back, 20, 30 years and talk about what was going on for you back then, because you've got a wide range of skills, right? You've honed over the years strategy
Yeah.
and planning, change and transformation, process improvement, leadership, project management, employee engagement, and the list goes on and on and on.
Police
So
officer.
tell, yeah, well, there you go. So a very cool, diversified background. But what was going on for you back then? You're, in your early 20s, maybe you're just out of school, you're entering into the corporate world. What was your original goals and aspirations back then?
Well, I never actually went into the corporate world back then. I got out of the high school and I was not a very good student. And I went to college. My parents were paying and I screwed off and I got an F on everything. And I came home, tail between my legs. Okay, I'm done with school. And my parents are like, we really think that you should do this. Is get the degree, get the job, get the retirement, boom, boom,
Yeah,
boom.
check, check, check.
Check, check, check. That was the world I grew up in. So I went back, kind of fired up, ready to go. And I failed a second semester. And my parents said, all right, free ride over. You're going to go to work
I
for yourself.
can't
And
imagine how that conversation must have went.
I was only child. My dad was a police officer, so you can imagine
Right.
my life.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I I started working jobs, and I was actually pretty good at things that I did, and I climbed the ladder until you get to a certain point where somebody'd been there for a while, and
Right.
they'd be like, mm-mm, "You're going back down because you're not going to take my job."
Mm,
And I'd move, and I think I did like 7 different jobs. And
wow.
finally, a friend of mine had gone into the Air Force, and right out. I mean, like he had to get parents' approval to get into the Air Force because of his age. And he was talking about it, and I was like, if I go into the Air Force, I'm going to get promoted on a schedule, and nobody can stop that unless I screw up. So why don't I just do that? So I wanted to go in the Air Force, and I went and I talked to the recruiter about it, and I was really interested in photography at the time. I still am, but so I was going to be combat camera, but the wait was 24 months to get in the Air
Wow.
Force. And I was like, well, I don't want to
Wow.
wait that long.
Yeah.
So what can I do? And he said, well, you can be a cop and you can go right in. And I was like, man, my dad's a cop. I don't really want to be a cop, but what the heck? I'll go in. And I went in the Air Force at the ripe age of 22. So
Wow.
I was around a lot of people that were a lot younger than I was. There was one guy that was 32 that was like at the age limit in my basic training class, or
Wow. So
platoon. But
can I just back up for 1 second then? So what did you originally go to school for? And was it two different things? Because you said you flunked out twice, right?
yeah, no, it was one. I loved computers when
Okay.
computers came up. So I was big into photography, and my mom was very supportive of the things that I was really into. So we ended up building a dark room in the basement. Then computers started coming out, and I had one of the very first personal computers, the Texas Instrument 4A, little
Hmm.
pad, and you plug it into a cassette recorder. And I loved it. And I was programming, and in high school, I took every single computer class you could. Love that stuff. One problem was I sucked at math. I've never really been good at math, which is kind of ridiculous now because I'm a Lean Six Sigma master black belt and I'm supposed to be like awesome in statistics and I still suck at math. I have to look everything up, get Excel to do it for me. But what I decided to do was go into computer sciences. And so I went to Northern Michigan University. It's the only college in the local area that would accept me. And I got there and I'm thinking, I've taken every class available. I know everything. I'm so smart. And there's all these people that are programming in assembly language and they're taking calculus and trigonometry courses. And I'm like, yeah,
Whole
I'm
different
not
league.
as smart as I think I am.
Right. You
So
were you
I
were humbled.
realized, well, so I actually I wrote a book and published it back in January of 2021 and or 2022. And when I one of the rules that I have for myself now is you are never as smart as you think you are. Somebody is always smarter.
Mm,
So
yeah.
no matter how much you learn, somebody knows more than you on that
Yeah.
subject. So just
It's
be
a great
humble.
lesson.
Be
Yeah.
humble. So and then
So
basically I just didn't apply myself. This was a
right.
problem that I had kind of growing up is I really didn't have to. Like I said, like when I was working these jobs, it just kind of came natural to me.
Mm,
And so I really didn't have to work hard to do well.
right.
So I just didn't work hard and then I didn't do well.
Right.
And in
Yeah.
high school, you're kind of this is kind of like a lesson in high school is that you have people that are in the slow classes and you have people that are in the advanced classes and they get a lot of focus. Now I know this because I transferred from elementary into high school and I was behind in math. And they tested me and they said, "Oh, well, you're going to go into the slow math class." And I got very specific, one-on-one almost instruction. And semester after that, I was out of the slow math. But I realized that now I'm in the movable middle and you can basically do anything you want. And
Right.
I can tell you that I actually should have been, I mean, there's no reason I should have even got through high school, but you just stick it out and you're going to get there.
Right.
It's just
Push
sad.
through the system, I guess, right? So
Yep. And I was, and
so
I. that's where it
It
was.
sounds like originally you had this kind of passion for photography. Computers kind of superseded that. You had this interest. You didn't necessarily have the work ethic. You didn't have the math. That didn't peter out twice over.
Yep.
So then you kind of fell into through a series of circumstances, ended up in the Air Force. Correct? That's kind of a recap of
Yep.
where. So at the Air Force, is this where you started learning a lot of the different skills and acquiring a lot of the different experiences that you coach and consult on today? Is that where that happened?
About, well, in 1990, so I went in 1988. In 1990, the Air Force started rolling out total quality management, TQM. They called it the Quality Air Force Program. Now, I was a cop in the Air Force and I was at a closure base. So that meant that things were kind of ramping down and I had opportunity to go to training classes that maybe I wouldn't have had as much opportunity to go to. So I started learning a lot of these courses in quality and I loved them. It made perfect sense. I'm like, this will work, and I was a cop in the Air Force. I wasn't a quality person. But I could see the value and just the intelligence around what I was learning. In 1998, I had the opportunity to retrain in place. This is probably one of those happy accidents things, but basically, they wanted to beef up the manpower and quality career field. They were doing competitive sourcing and privatization across the Air Force. There was what we refer to in the military as a bogey to pay. They were cutting money in the budget, so they needed to figure out ways to save this money. And they were doing it through a program called competitive sourcing and privatization. So they were increasing the career field by like 500 people. It was already a small career field, so this is a big jump. And if you would go into this career field, you were going to be stateside. But they had an opportunity that if you were overseas, and I was stationed in Germany at the time, you could retrain in place. And I went and I met with I applied. I went and I met with the director of the program, the wing program there. His name was Colonel Fouché. And you had to do two things as part of your getting into this career field. One, you had to take an English exam, and the other one, you had to take an algebra exam.
Oh
And I
no,
was
here
like,
comes the math again.
yeah, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And I got to meet him and we were talking about what I had done. Now, because I was one of the few people that really went out there and like learned everything I could about quality in my previous assignment, which was in Turkey at a remote, the Air Force had said, we want 100% of all military to be trained in the basic course, quality awareness, quality Air Force awareness program. I was the only person that had any training. So guess what? Out of 60 military on the installation, you're in.
Oh,
And I got to
wow.
teach the quality awareness course. So when I got in front of Colonel Fouché, we're sitting there talking about, this is really interesting. I really like this. Oh, by the way, I taught this course, and when I was in the as a cop, I used to teach a lot of different programs. And he's like, "Oh, you can teach? Oh, you don't need to take any of these tests. I'm just gonna prove this." Because he
Wow.
wanted me to take over the 17 wing training programs that they were running, and they didn't have anybody to run them. And
Wow.
I was like, okay.
Just kind of
So I
landed in
didn't,
your lap.
yeah. And it was because if I had taken that test, I probably would have failed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I,
So
so,
I'm gonna take a left turn for a second, and then we're gonna come back to you and your story because what I want to do now is I want to bring up this post that you wrote on LinkedIn a week or two ago, and I'm gonna read it
all
because
right.
it's gonna frame the rest of our discussion, where we're gonna be diving into luck and your view on luck and how it has played a role in your journey and for the people that you consult. So I'm gonna read this for the audience, and I'll put a link to the actual post in the show notes as well if anybody wants to go and read it and like it and engage in it as well. So here it is. This is how you start off. Do you think you're lucky? What is luck? Luck is a result occurring by chance rather than through one's own actions. But we can't control chance, right? You know that luck is actually both good and bad, right? Look back over your last 7 days. Make a list of 10 major things that's happened over those days. This first time you try to make this exercise, you might find it hard to make a list of 10 things, but over time, you're going to find it easier and easier to find 10 things. In fact, you'll probably have difficulty keeping it to just 10 things after a while. And then for each of your 10 items on your list, identify if it was a good thing or a bad thing from your perspective. How did it rate? Then consider if this was something you planned to happen, meaning you were making an effort for it to occur, or was it unplanned? For instance, and then you give an example here. A dinner out with friends could have been planned a few weeks ago. A tire blowing out on your car probably wasn't a planned occurrence. What was the result of each of these 10 items, good or bad? And then you say, let me share one of my 10 items from last week. My wife and I went out to dinner at a newish wine restaurant that's about 15 minutes from our farm. I've been wanting to try it for a while now. However, it was a last minute decision to go out to dinner and to pick this place. Their food and wine was simple, but pretty good. But the atmosphere, the weather was fantastic. We sat at a table amongst the grapevines and listened to a musician who was really quite good. It was an enjoyable evening, a success. But was it planned? No, not really. The dinner was last minute, but it is someplace that I've been thinking about trying fruit for a while. Was the result positive? Yes, but it was just easily could not have been. Were we lucky? Yes, but in a good way. But did I have a hand in that luck? Was it just random or was it planned luck? And then you give a shout out to the place for those interested. The place is called Contrada Vineyard and Kitchen. And then you go on to say, through my continuously examining my past weeks, I'm able to recognize more and more the successful things that occur and why. This allows me to plan things more and more and even create instances of planned luck. We can't control chance, but we can create instances where chance can be more favorable to us. So I thought that was super interesting. Obviously, that's a topic that I dive into every week here on the podcast and in the newsletter. And now I want to use that to go back and talk about your journey that we've been going through here and your take on that. So, first of all, um, you shared with us your story. You originally were into photography, then you got into computers, kind of
Still
flunked
into
out of that.
photography.
Right. But
Still into it.
didn't work out as a career as your original aspiration was.
Right.
Kind of fell into the Air Force because you couldn't get into other military areas at the time. Kind of fell into this job of teaching the quality because you just happened to be the only guy with the qualifications at the time. You had the algebra test waived for you. Like this was a series of events that led to you getting to do this job that then gave you all these skill sets, strategy, planning, operations, operational efficiencies that you now consult on. It was like a series of happy accidents that got you here. Can you just kind of reflect on that for a second?
Well, I'm gonna just throw out one thing where I kind of realized things that were going on. So my first assignment I told you was a closure assignment as a cop. So I'm a senior airman. I'm an enlisted member. I'm not even a NCO. And they're closing down this assignment, and I'm one of the last six military police to remain on the installation as we close. There's like 30 of us total to close the base. They
I would just take it from the top. You were a junior guy on the base, and then you kind of froze there. So
Okay, so I was a senior airman, so I'm junior enlisted, and we're on a closure base, and we're down to like there's like 30 people on the installation. There's six cops. We brought in civilian contract police officers to patrol and guard the base. I'm put in charge of one of those patrols, one of those groups, one of the shifts as an airman. Well, what I realized is that when you're in the right place at the right time, things happen. When you're not in the right place at the right time, things are not going to happen. Okay. So this is kind of part of this whole thing of like putting yourself in the right place. And there's a lot of
Mm.
ways to do that. But what I would do is there's a requirement to go and check certain doors every 2 hours because of the security of that building. And I would do that. I would just go out there and do it. Now, other people didn't. They were
Right.
lazy and they didn't do that. I
Yep.
did. And you know what? I'd catch things open and unsecure all the time. And I'd be recognized for it because I was doing my job. And I'm like, but
Yeah.
this was one of those things that I was like looking at this and I'm not doing anything different. There's nothing, I'm just doing my job. I'm in the right place at the right time. And it just so happens that every once in a while they'd leave a window open or a door unlocked and I'd find it. And now we've got an unsecured, high value facility that I just discovered and maybe saved a huge theft or, whatever. So really started thinking about all this, but it really wasn't until about 98 when I went into the quality manpower and quality career field. I was researching because I'm really interested in this. I want to learn. So I was researching different tools, quality tools. There's a bunch of different tools. Nowadays, I teach and I coach on this. But one of them that I came across is a thing called a Venn diagram. And this Venn diagram had four circles on it. And in those circles were the words, what is it that you like to do? What is it that you're good at doing? You know what I'm saying here. What is it
Yep.
that you people need and what is it that people will pay for?
Yep.
And in the
The
very center of it
intersection of
was an
those.
arrow
Yeah.
with a star and it said purpose.
Yeah.
That was a Venn diagram. It was not called the purpose Venn diagram, which was later dubbed by somebody in a blog. And it was never called the Ikigai, which is what they call it today.
Yep.
Okay. Because Ikigai means your purpose. But when I saw that, I was like, just kind of like, whoa, this makes a lot of sense. And I started thinking about what is it that I'm doing? What is it that I love doing? And, people obviously need what I'm doing and I really love it. And they're, like I'm getting paid. And clearly people pay for this. There's consulting organizations out there that do this. I'm learning about all this. This is back in 98. Now, in 2000, a chief master sergeant wanted me to get involved in Toastmasters. I'd been speaking. Now, understand that in high school, I was terrified to speak. I'd cry in front of
Mm.
audiences. But over time, especially the military, they kind of force you into these things. I got, I was speaking. I was going to say I got good at it, but I was doing it.
You got comfortable.
I got comfortable. And it's something that I often say, you think you're a good speaker, but you're just speaking. You're not really good at it. And so I went and I told him, I said, hey, you come out to this Air Force Sergeants Association meetings because having a chief there will really send a message. And I'll go and help you because he was really big into Toastmasters. I'll help you whatever you need. So I went and I, of course, got involved because by this time I had learned the value of being involved in nonprofit organizations and volunteering. There's benefit in all of that.
Hmm.
And I'm at this one of the like planning meetings that we had. We met every week for our regular meeting, but we would occasionally meet for planning on the council. And I was on the council. So we're sitting there, and there was this expat, retired master sergeant, and he said, I'm not going to be there. My wife and I aren't going to be at the meeting next week because we're going on a cruise. And I'm young. So I'm now like a staff sergeant or a tech sergeant at this time, but it's like, hey, I love going on cruises. I had been on one cruise in my entire life, and it really wasn't all that good. But that's what I said. I love going on cruises. And he looked right in my eye and he said, we go about 6 to 8 times a year. The cruise ship pays me with a free cruise, if I give 2 motivational speeches on that cruise. And I'm just sitting there stunned, probably like, you know, and I started thinking about that and I'm like, well, how can I get somebody to pay me to do the things I love to do,
Hmm.
doing the things that I love to do and that they need? And all of this, the Venn diagram and that conversation all started coming together. And out of that, I created what I call now a personal strategic plan. But I created a plan with 6 goal areas. And ever since then, I've been following that. Everything that had happened up to that point, there was some pretty powerful things. I mean, I was the NCO of the year for the United States Air Forces in Europe.
Wow.
I was selected for a special duty assignment to the USAFE Elite Guard of a high level military security police organization. And a lot of successes, a lot of good things that happened. I look back on those and I'm like, that's all dumb luck. I just happened to be in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time.
Hmm.
But everything after that was I developed these goal areas that I focus on.
Yeah.
And I focus every day. As a matter of fact, I got my plan right there. Every week, I'm writing this down. What am I going to do to move the needle? What goal area actions am I completing this week? And although it's still chance, I don't control what really happens,
Yeah.
but I definitely plan out
Yeah.
where I'm going to be.
So I want to dive into this a bit with you because in my newsletter, in a lot of my LinkedIn posts, I talk about the fact that every happy accident success story, almost to a T, all follows this kind of three-stage act. Stage one, the person is setting the stage. They're doing something. They're increasing their luck surface area. They're trying stuff. They may not have a plan. They may not, know exactly what they're doing, but they're getting out there. They're volunteering. They're getting involved in the community. They're meeting new people. They're testing ideas. They're doing Toastmasters, whatever. They're out there trying stuff. And they may think they're going in one direction, right? Maybe I think I'm going to be into computers. And then you fall into the Air Force. And then you end up having this conversation with somebody about, boy, I get paid to go on cruises. That's what I call the happy accident moment. Something unexpected lands in your lap. Now, for a lot of people, the story ends there. They don't recognize the happy accident. They're like, no, no, I'm going in this direction. That's a distraction. The real successful happy accident stories are the people like you where you go, hold on a second, light bulb going off here. There's an opportunity there. It might not have been what I was expecting or what I was planning, but I see that opportunity. But then the third act of this play is I have to know how to capitalize on this now. There's work that has to be done. I have to have some good best practices. I have to follow, I have to work hard. I got to do some things to put now the pieces in place to be able to capitalize on this. And it sounds like from your story, what you're telling me, it followed that almost exact same three-stage act like I write about in every happy accident story. Is that kind of how you see it unfolding as well?
Oh, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the post that you recited on LinkedIn is how you do this. So a lot of people, they just kind of, they're on autopilot. They
Hmm.
don't have a plan. They don't understand what's going on. We have people that talk about things like, oh, you've got to be self-aware. Well, how the heck are you supposed to be self-aware? The only way to be self-aware is by looking back and seeing what happened and how did you handle it? What was going on and how did you respond to that? Because guess what? That's a trigger. Somebody cut you off on the road. How do you respond? And then how do you prevent it? Then now you start to plan. That's why I said in that post that when you first start that exercise of writing down 10 things, you'll be lucky to get 3 or 4. You'll struggle. And I've seen this over and over again. People struggle
Mhm.
with getting anything on the paper because they really don't recognize the things that happen in their life as
Right.
they're happening.
Lack of awareness or
Oh
observation. Yeah.
yeah, just total. But then what happens is as you start to identify things that are happening and whether or not you've planned them or not, you start focusing on planning the positive big things in your life. And the next thing you know, now you've got a life full of planned things.
Right.
I've worked with a lot of organizations in strategic planning. Understand that strategic planning is a very long term activity. So when I come into an organization and we start working on this, I know exactly where they are. 6 months later, a year later, they're just like, yeah, I just don't see any improvement in the organization. And I'm like, oh, really? Let's go back to the day I started working with you and let's talk about what was going on and what wasn't going on. And now let's look at where we are today. And they'd be like, how did all that happen? I said, because it's strategic, it's long term. We don't see this. We fail to recognize these things.
Yeah.
And
I think Jeff
that happens
Bezos
in our
talks about
life.
Jeff Bezos talks about when people would congratulate him and Amazon on a great quarter, he'd say, "Yeah, thanks. That was baked 3 years ago." Right? The
Exactly.
results you saw this quarter was from work we did 3 years ago. Thank you for
Right.
congratulating me on it today. And that's kind of like what you're talking about. It's a long-term thing, and eventually good things are going to come out of it. I want to dive in for a second. So you talk about in this post creating more favorable chances for yourself. Um, I call that increasing your luck surface area, right? There's things that you can
I like
do.
that term.
You don't know what is going to come your way. You don't know when, but you know, looking through in the past, doing X, Y, and Z leads to good results. I'm going to do more of X, Y, and Z. Doing A, B, and C leads to bad results. I'm going to do less of A, B, and C. If you just keep doing that reflective exercise and implementing what you're learning, more good things are going to come your way. But like you say in the post, you don't control chance. You don't know what good things are going to come your way or when. You just know better things are going to happen to you. So obvious example from you was, hey, I decided to go ahead and enter the Air Force. It's better than sitting around and doing nothing and waiting for a job to come my way. I decided to, take this station in Germany. I decided to do this quality course. I decided to open my mouth and say, hey, I love cruises, right? You're putting yourself out there, you're doing these things, and you're putting yourself in favorable chances. Now, there are instances where you just have complete dumb luck and it alters the trajectory of your life, right? So example I like to give is you have a morning routine. Every morning you like to give yourself 45 minutes to an hour, and that's your time. You get up slowly, you have a coffee, maybe you read the paper, you kind of ease into the day, and then you get yourself ready and you go to work. But one day, for whatever reason, you didn't sleep very well the night before, you just keep hitting the snooze button and you hit the snooze button until you get to the point where like I don't have time to get up and make myself a coffee. I got to get dressed and get out the door, but I love my coffee. So I'm going to stop at this coffee shop. I'll get them to make me a coffee. And while you're there, you strike up a conversation with the person serving you the coffee. Like, oh, I kind of like this person. I think I'll come back here tomorrow. And that starts to repeat itself. And then next thing you know, you're dating this person. Fast forward a few years down the road, you're married. Fast forward a few years down the road, you got your first kid on the way. You trace that back to the fact that you decided to hit the snooze button. That was really the trigger that took your life in that direction. That was not an intentional thing. That was kind of a purely luck happenstance thing that changed your directory.
Yep.
What you're talking about is no, you can do things that are going to put
Oh yeah.
yourself in a more favorable position. So, what are some of the tips that you have for people on how to create more favorable chances for yourself?
Well, it's the big thing is you got to identify where you're going. Where is that grand future for you? A lot of people don't know this. And it takes a little bit of work to get there, but it's not that hard. When you know what that looks like, you can actually get the picture. So I'm a big golfer. I never was when I was a kid, but I picked it up in the Air Force and love it. But what I see about golf is that every shot, you're visualizing the shot before you take it. You stand behind the ball and you look at where are you going and what do you need to do to get that ball right where you want it to be. And that's what we need to do in our lives. We need to visualize where we want to go. And then what do I need to do? What are the stepping stones to get there? In 2000, I knew what I wanted. And part of that was when I broke it down and said, what would they pay for? One of those things, well, they probably would pay for somebody educated. And what would that education look like, John? Well, they probably would pay for somebody who was a doctor, who had a PhD, because PhDs are smart. Okay, John, well, what do you have as far as education? Nothing. I didn't even have an associate's degree. So I set out the path of, all right, I'm going to get my associate's degree and my bachelor's degree and my master's degree and my PhD. I had no idea what all those things would be in, but I'm going to focus on associate's degree. And it's one
Mm.
step at a time, knowing that in the future, this is what I'm working towards. And as I go along, these things will happen. When I left the Air Force, I didn't have a job. I thought I had a job, but I didn't have a job afterwards. But
Sounds like that's
I get
another
a
story.
yeah, I get a phone call from Booz Allen Hamilton, top 10 consulting firm in the nation. And they said, "We're interested to know if you'd like to this job. Let me read it to you." And they told me what it is. It was a strategic planning position. And I'm like, "Hey, that sounds great, but I didn't apply for it." And they said, "That's okay. We haven't posted it." But somebody had put my resume in Booz Allen's system. Somebody in my network had done that, got my resume
Oh,
and put it in the system. And when I walked in the office to interview, I sit down across from the hiring manager, and he's got my resume sitting there, and there's these red circles around all these words. And he says, "You have every word on your resume that we're looking for this job." So they had done a Boolean search, you know, and they pulled this resume out. And I looked right at him, bold face, and I said, "So is this an interview or you just want to know when I can start?" And he's like, "When can you start?" And I
wow.
got the job.
Love it.
But it was, I mean, like, this was some chief master sergeant that I had worked with, and he saw what I was doing in other ways. He was impressed, got a copy of my resume. I don't even remember giving it to him. And he put it into the system. And
Wow.
that ended up with I mean, like, there was a career changing job because I
Right.
learned so much. But that was, and
Yeah.
like, I didn't do anything specifically to make that happen. But what did I do is all of the activities and, getting my degree, getting the experience, being able to put all of those keywords on that resume that they
Yeah.
were looking for.
You were setting the stage. You had no
Yeah,
idea this was going to
exactly.
land in your lap, but you did all the work to get it there. So
Read in that surface
that's
area.
yep, that's what we can do to increase our luck service area. Put in the work, get yourself out there, do the things, visualize where you want to be. Now there's the next part. So the opportunity lands in your lap. And you just kind of described a perfect example of where that happened to you. So now, what advice do you have for people on seizing or capitalizing on that opportunity? Because we see so many stories of new entrepreneurs where they come across an unexpected idea for a product or a company and they run with it. Now, 90% of those startups fail. That's what the stats tell us, right?
Yeah.
But then you see the stories of like Sarah Blakely with Spanx, the Airbnb guys, the post-it notes, the microwave, all these things where they stumbled across this idea and they became huge successes. So for stage three or act three of the happy accident story, what advice do you have for new entrepreneurs? What can they and should they do if an unexpected opportunity lands in their lap?
So a lot of these unexpected opportunities were just, they just went at it just like everybody else. It was pure luck. So I'm gonna share. You pointed out that my wife and I, we own a 100-acre horse farm.
Yep.
owning a horse farm was not my plan. It wasn't.
Okay. Yep.
M- We were my wife had two horses at a barn. The lady had basically her third round of cancer, and we decided that we were going to buy that property. And the uncle came in and basically wanted twice what it was worth. There was no way that we were going to be able to afford it. So
Mm.
we had to turn him down. A week later, she ended up in hospice and died that week.
Wow.
He came into the property and he basically kicked everybody off. And there was easily like 50 horses on property. You have 60 days to get off the property. And you think in Texas, there's a lot of places to put a horse, but there really isn't.
Mm.
So we started looking, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, this is not my plan. Having a horse property is not what I wanted, but it's what she wants. And I'm going to support her. And from a business perspective, I can do this. And I started thinking about it. And I started thinking about, well, one of my goal areas is experience, getting the experience that when I stand in front of a CEO of a company, I can talk about the exact same things they're experiencing. And I'm like, well, maybe starting a company like this that's so different and running it and being successful at it might actually be a good experience that I can
Wow.
share with other CEOs, owners, founders, presidents, whatever. And we did it in 2016. We bought the property, we bought the farm,
Wow.
and it's now 2024 and we're still going.
Wow.
And we are one of the largest equestrian operations in the South Texas area. We're always full. We always have a waiting list. And I look back on it and I'm like, I've seen so many things that I've learned. Oh my God, this is what they have to deal with. And now I can have those conversations at a deeper level, more than just, I read it in a book.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is that every time that you are faced with the opportunity, the question is, do you have like a plan to look at and say, does this fit within the plan? Or am I just chasing it?
Right.
And if you're just chasing it, well, then good luck because, it's going to be determination that gets you through it. And I'm sure that's what happened with all of these successes. And they look back on it and everybody's like, oh, well, look at, they were overnight success. No, they weren't.
Mm.
But, and we only look at the really successful people. We don't actually examine the people that weren't successful and see the
Mm.
similarities between the two and just say, well, what was the deciding factor?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's somebody that you meet, an investor, or there's usually some little thing. There's a book
Yeah.
called Cumulative Advantage that kind of talks about this.
Right.
Really good book. But that's the big
Yeah.
thing, as I say, is you got to look, does this fit in my plan? Can I make it fit in my plan? And if I
Right.
can't, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. But if you don't have a plan, it really doesn't matter what you do.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to align in order for something to be, even if it's in your plan, doesn't mean it's going to be successful necessarily. You may not meet the right investor. The timing could just be off. COVID could hit. There's all these things
Yep.
that are outside of your control. But if it looks and it smells and it feels like it kind of fits where you're going and it'd be a great experience and an opportunity, your advice is go for it, have a bit of a plan, and then learn along the way, it sounds like.
Yep.
Love it. So we've kind of gone through all three stages of the happy accident story. You've given us all kinds of examples from your own life. I want to finish this off with a couple last few questions here. I asked you before the podcast, what is one of your favorite quotes? And I love the one you gave me. And it said, "You're never taller than when you stoop to help a child." Can you tell me what's the story behind that quote? Who's it from and why does it mean
Well,
so
it's
much to you?
actually not from anybody. It's an anonymous quote.
Okay.
And I discovered that quote, oh my gosh, 20 years ago, easy, maybe 40 years ago. a long time ago. And I think I was actually stationed in California, and I ran across this organization called the Make-A-Wish Foundation. And there was the Make-A-Wish Foundation of the tri-counties or tri-cities, but basically it was right there in that central California area. And I watched some of the videos, they're trying to get you to, be a volunteer and be a wish giver, and they're heart-wrenching.
Mm,
Some of the videos are just like they'll rip your heart right out.
yeah.
And I was like, there's no way that I would ever be able to do that. But what I can do is I'm a good organizer and I'm a good business person. And what I can do is I can help you actually run this organization. And
Mm,
I remember seeing that quote around that time. And I was just like, it might have been from Make-A-Wish, but I was just like, that's what it's all about. I
mm,
talked about this book, Cumulative Advantage,
yeah.
and at the very end of the community, he talks about this thing called like the spark, and basically this point where you just launch. At the very end of the book, he talks about helping somebody else find their spark.
Mm,
I use my vision every day when I wake up to when I go to sleep is that I will leave nothing in my wake but success.
mm,
So when I post on LinkedIn, when I write articles for Forbes and blogs and other magazines, when I write books, when I talk to people, when I'm on a podcast interview, my goal is always to share success. What does it look like? How do you get it? What do you got to do? Because I want people to walk away from the conversation going, wow, that was helpful.
mm,
There was value in that. And when
yeah.
I read that last section, I mean, it wasn't even part of the book. It's like at the very end, and he's talking about how you can like help others. And I'm like, that's exactly what it is. Reach
Yeah.
down and grab somebody else and let them find their spark.
Mm,
And
yeah. Lift others
hopefully
up along
they're
with you
prepared.
along the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, this has been quite the enlightening conversation. You have an amazing story, all kinds of different, happy accidents that happened to you, but you obviously had the curiosity, you had the boldness to recognize them and capitalize on them. And here you are, you get to reflect back and educate others on how to do the same. So, John, I just want to end off with saying thank you so much for being on the show. Where's the best place for people to go to learn more about you and connect with you?
If they go to my website, www.crosscutter.com, it's CROSSCTR.com, they can they can get hold of me through there, but I have everything that I've written, this podcast and all other podcasts will be there, presentations that I've given that were recorded, share everything.
Love it.
So that's a great way to get hold of me, but otherwise I'm on LinkedIn every single day and I post every single day without fail.
Perfect. Perfect. We'll put the link to your website and the link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. So thanks again, John, and stay lucky, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Happy Accidents podcast. I hope you find these stories as intriguing and insightful as I do. But make sure you don't miss an episode. You can subscribe to my Accidental Solopreneur channel on YouTube and watch these episodes in video form, or subscribe to the Happy Accidents podcast on Apple and Spotify for your listening pleasure. Until next time, stay lucky, my friends.